the calves have started to put on their winter coat, and they look real nice. And all these little calves, they got it look like they have a real thick fur coat on, so they look real shiny and pretty. And all the flies are gone too, because it's the cold is killing the flies, and so the flies don't do real good when it's cold. And even when it was warm, I spray my my cattle for flies every day. So I really keep the flies off of them, because the whole thing about the flies is that they give your cattle pink eye. They they drink the blood off of your cattle. They make your cattle not feel good, and they also give your cattle pink eye. And I had 0 pink eye cases so far, knock on wood. But I think that it has a lot to do with the fact that I spray my cattle for flies every day. I haven't had any pink fly, or I haven't had any pink eye issues at all. And so yeah. And the cattle all got their winter coats coming in, so they all look real pretty, and they look like they're walking around with a big thick fur coat on. And it's getting cool. It's from my understanding, it's just supposed to be getting cooler and cooler and cooler. We're not going to be going over 85 here anytime soon, from my understanding, or 90. We're not going to be going anywhere over 90. It's supposed to be getting cooler and cooler. And so the feeder cattle market did bounce back a little bit today. And okay, so I've talked about this whole thing, and I think right now we may be potentially entering a bear market. Nobody knows if we're entering a bear market. Okay, nobody knows. I don't know. Your mother doesn't know. President Trump doesn't know. Warren Buffett doesn't know. There is no way to tell what direction the market is going to go, and it's important to remember that all the time. Okay, I hope that and my whole thing about having people fail is that when people fail, it's kind of sad. It is. All right, let's be honest about it. There's a kind of a sadness to it. There is, right? I mean, it's like, this person just legitimately failed. They failed so badly, they potentially lost everything. All right, they may not recover, and the whole thing about, failing and, going into the negative financially is like, let's say that, and here's the thing, I live in an agricultural area, okay? And me, when I drive to these different sale barns, a lot of times these sale barns are located in agricultural areas, okay? When I drive around, and I've already said the whole thing about this is that when I take a look at a farm, I can tell you what that balance sheet looks like within 30 seconds, okay? I can tell you what their balance sheet looks like. I can tell you what's happening with that farm within 30 seconds. All right, I can tell you, whether they're making any money or not. I could tell you with a 93% accuracy. All right, maybe even a little bit more than 93%. Because the whole thing is like, it doesn't matter how much money you're bringing in. The biggest determining factor of what is happening for the financials for the farm usually tends to be the man or the woman who is running the farm. Okay, the person who is running the business tends to have the most say in what happens to the financials of the business. Okay, and so and that's the whole thing about Mr. Earl, right? Like, if you told me Mr. Earl, if I didn't know anything about Mr. Earl and he just told me that he's making $12 an hour, I would tell you that that's pretty rough, right? But then if you told me, oh, well, Mr. Earl is taking his money and putting them into high dividend stock, or not even high dividend, he's putting them into, stocks that are, a good company. He's purchasing things like Coca-Cola, and these stocks are producing him a dividend. And, if you told me that, then I would say, yeah, Mr. Earl, and he's been doing that for whatever, 30, 40, 50 years. If you told me that, then I would say, yeah, he did very well for himself, and he will probably continue to do well for himself. But, from my understanding, he passed away recently. A couple of years ago, he did pass away, from my understanding. But, but it doesn't matter how much money you make. I could take a look at the farm, and I could tell you if the farm is going underwater or not. But at the end of the day, maybe the person who's running the farm has other investments. Maybe the person who's running the farm, whatever, has a, but it really depends. All right, it really depends. And this whole thing is like, when people fail, it's sad. Let's just admit it. My whole thing, it's sad, okay? And there is a sadness to it. All right, it's like this person just legitimately failed. All right, watching people fail is not funny. All right, I talk about this all the time. It's not amusing to have people fail. It's not. Right, and I think right now a lot more people are going to get to see what I mean, and in the worst way. All right, this is the thing that it's like the moral dilemma. It's like, how do you stop this from happening to so many people, right? Because a lot of people, if you end up in a situation where you lost, you lost, let's say for a lot of people, if you're in a situation, okay, but here's the thing, like me, when I drive around and I go to these sale barns, or even in just my local area when I'm driving around town, I see people with their farms. All right, I see, oh, this man has, or this, well, I mean, it is a man. I've seen the man in the tractor. It's a man, and he's got a couple of 100 acres of some kind of a grain, right? Sometimes it's soybeans, sometimes it's hay, sometimes it's corn. He's got a couple of 100 acres, and a couple of months ago, I know that he brought in, a couple of hundred, cattle from the sale barn at about 500 pounds. I take a look at what he's feeding these animals, and these animals are probably putting on about 1.5 pounds a day. Right? That's where a lot of people are. A lot of people end up putting on about 1.5 pounds a day. All right? A lot of people do. All right? And so, and now with what happened to the market, I mean, this man just lost money on all of his cattle and, effectively all of his grain, because you have to understand that grain in Texas, in central Texas, in my area, grain does not grow very well. All right, grain does not grow very well. We don't have a whole lot of water. We don't have, our summers are blazing hot. We don't have, any groundwater, effectively any groundwater. If we do, I don't know where it is. I mean, it may be super far, and, it may not even be a lot. We're effectively not sitting on any kind of an aquifer. Our summers are blazing hot. We had, a drought conditions for like the last, I got like 1 inch of rain before this last rainstorm. I had, before last week, before that, we had about 1 inch of rain for about 2 months. Over the course of 2 months, we had about 1 inch of rain, and it was blazing hot. It was in the mid 90s until about 2 weeks ago. All right, effectively nothing grew. No crops grew. Nothing grew. And, the man, he may have, bought into the cattle market. And it's not just this one man. I mean, I see it all the time. When I'm driving around to these local sale barns and I'm taking a look, because that's what you do when you drive, right? I mean, you look around. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do when you drive. And I just happened to see a cattle farm off on the side of the road. I happened to see cattle where there weren't cattle a couple months ago. There are now cattle, and there are 100 of them or something like that. And these animals are about 500 on the average. Well, then the man must have recently bought these cattle, right? And with what happened to these prices, this is also, I warned about all this stuff, and I'm not here to rub anything in anybody's face. I'm not here to kick anybody while they're down, and a lot of this stuff, people are going to learn this stuff whether you want to or not, and it's kind of sad. There is kind of a sadness to it. It's also one of my moral dilemmas, right? It's like, if I'm looking to do the most good that I can for the world, because you have to understand, I am in a situation where I do not worry about money at all. Even if I had nothing, I could redo everything in 30 seconds. I make such a drastic sum of money, it doesn't matter to me. And I'll go into my personal finances here in a little bit. There is a sadness to failing, right? To watching so many people fail. But then it's like, you also, there is also it just is what it is. That and I'm not here to be malicious. When I talk about this stuff, I'm not being malicious about it. I'm not being a prick about it. I feel like a prick. I'm telling you, I'm not being malicious about it. I'm not getting a kick out of it. I'm not getting any kind of enjoyment out of it. I'm not, this is from what I have observed and from what I have, logically determined, is that a lot of these people are actually idiots. There is also that part of it. There is the part of it where it's sad. There is a part of it where it's sad to see, people fail on such a massive scale. And it's also kind of just like, well, how do you save an idiot from themselves? Right? And, a lot of this stuff, it doesn't matter whether you want to believe me or not, it's the truth. And you're going to figure this out whether you want to or not. And I hope that, you learned as much as you could while things were going good. I hope you did, because, things might be getting rough. I don't know. But here's the thing about my personal finances. And I don't really want to, I'll talk about my personal finances after this next, because I don't want to follow up, having, watching everybody fail, but you're, with my personal finances. I don't want to follow it up with that. I'll talk about something else and then I'll go into my personal finances. But, you're going to get to see what I mean by almost everybody is borderline failing. Almost everybody is barely making enough to get by, or almost everybody is actually going underwater financially. And if we enter a bear market, I don't know if we're entering a bear market. Nobody knows. There is no way to tell. Who knows? This thing may go sideways and downward slowly for the next 5 years straight. And if that happens, it's going to absolutely devastate a majority of people. It will. All right. A majority of people in the cattle business will absolutely. Downwards momentum is going to be what causes the most problem for the most people. All right. Prices don't really matter. Downwards momentum and upwards momentum. A lot of people benefit from upwards momentum, but a lot of people fail in downwards momentum. All right. And I'm telling you, I'm being completely honest about it. I'm not being a doofus about it. I'm not being a prick about it. I'm just telling you, when I go to these sale barns to pick up my cattle, I drive through a lot of agricultural communities, and I drive in every which way. I go to the north. Sometimes I go to the northeast. Sometimes I go to the southeast. Sometimes I go in every direction. Sometimes I go to the northwest. I go in every direction, and I see these fields when I drive by them. And every once in a while, I'll notice, oh, this person brought in about 100 cattle. Maybe brought in about 150 cattle. And then you take a look next to their cattle, and they got a couple hundred acres of grain or hay or whatever it is, right? And you'll see what I mean. And when I say you'll see what I mean, I'm not rubbing it in your face. A lot of this stuff, there's actually a sadness to it. There is a sadness to it, but there is also the whole thing about, if you give, the last thing you need to do when you have, look, okay, the whole idea of the group hugging a bunch of losers is not going to help anybody. All right. You have to get it in your head that you can yourself do better. You can. There is always that possibility that you can just flat out do better. And the whole thing about sucking is, if you suck that bad, you can easily improve your outcome. You can. All right. Just remember that you can do better. The last thing we need is to have a bunch of these idiots grouping together and group hugging each other, going on a magical journey together. All right. That's the last thing we need. That's not going to help anybody. You can do better. If you look at your financials and your financials are going downwards, just remember, if you're in a situation where you're doing horrible, just remember you could easily do better. And when you watch me run my farm, understand that my financials, I will go into my financials here in a little bit. But, yesterday I was talking about, I don't really want to talk about my financials after I just discussed the idea of, you're going to, if we enter a bear market, you're going to see what I mean by a majority of people fail. And, you're going to see what people really are. And, and a lot of people barely make enough to get by, and a majority of people fail. I don't want to follow up my personal finances with that. But the whole idea yesterday, and the whole idea of the of understanding your investment and not being concerned about the price, and the way that I look at money, okay, because when you take a look at my financial situation, you have to understand that I effectively am in the very top percentiles of the entire economy. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. It doesn't matter what you think. I'm the one with the money. Well, I mean, are you have fun with your worthless opinion. I'm the one with the money. What does it matter to me? I don't care. If it comes down to it, you can have your opinion. Your opinion's not going to get anything for you. It's not going to. What are you going to do with your opinion? It's not going to do anything for you. And at the end of the day, if it comes down to it, I'll just be rich by myself. Do I maliciously want that to happen? No, I don't. All right? I'm the one with the money. What does it matter to me? I don't care. I'm legitimately, I make so much money. I am in the very top percentiles of the entire economy. And what I do with my money, I can decide. All right. And I'm not actively looking to sell my soul to the devil. All right. If I want to make $35,000 a month and only spend $3,500, then that's what I'll do. If I want to make $40,000 a month and only spend $3,500 a month, then that's what I'll do. What's it to anybody else? What does it matter to anybody else? It's my money, right? I'm the one who made it. I'm the one with the money. I'll do whatever I want. Nobody's paying me to do anything. I'm not going on a journey with anybody. I don't care if you died. All right? I'm the one with the money. I don't care what you think. It doesn't matter what your opinions. You're allowed to have your opinion. Everyone's allowed to have their opinion, but I'm just saying, if you can't take a look at something and just at the end of the day, your opinion's not going to do anything. And if your opinion's wrong, then have fun with that. I'm the one with the money. I don't care. I'll be rich by myself if that's what it comes down to. I'm not a malicious person. I'm not looking to make people poor. I'm legitimately showing you my business. I run this business and I make a boatload of money doing it. But the whole thing about, yesterday when I was talking about the, how to, conceptually understand money instead of just looking at it as like a poor person, right? Like me, when I take a look at something, I always ask myself, do I need money? No, I don't need money. And if I needed money, I could just pay myself more money. What does it matter? I don't need more money, right? And this whole idea about me spending $10,000 a month, and let's say we raised it to $20,000 a month. And let's say I went to the bank and I said, hey, banker, give me a loan for $20,000 a month, right? Let's say I went to the banker and I said, hey, give me a loan for $20,000. Give me a loan for $240,000. Right now, my business, even in this market, my business still probably produces me about $11,000 or $12,000 a month. My business still probably produces me about $11,000 or $12,000 a month, and I'm only liquidating 5 to 10% of my assets to produce that money. Here, within about 4 or 5 months, I'll actually double that amount of money. I'll actually be paying myself. I'll actually be liquidating 10 cattle instead of 5. I'll be liquidating about 10 cattle a month here within about 4 or 5 months. And that will still only be about 5 to 10% of my investment portfolio. So, what does it, so let's say that I bring home $12,000 a month, right? If I bring home $12,000 a month and I leverage against 2,000 of it, and I'm only liquidating 5% or 10% of my herd. Let's say I'm only liquidating 10% of my herd. If I'm liquidating 10% of my herd, I still have my other, or it's actually 10 to 15%, not 5 to 10, it's 10 to 15%. So let's say that I liquidate 15% of my herd. If I liquidate 15% of my herd, 10 to 15% of my herd, I still have 85 to 90% of my investment. If I legitimately need money, I can just sell one of my animals or whatever, right? I still have 700-pound animals. I still have 600-pound animals, whatever it may be. This is also what I mean by I am so far in the positive that it doesn't even matter. Like, even if I took a loan for $240,000 and it was $2,000 a month, by the time if I legitimately went and spent $20,000 a month, if I legitimately did that, I would still, and I just, even if I bought like a Lamborghini would be whatever, $4,000 a month. And and I'd still have $16,000 a month left over, and chances are, if I turn the car in a year later, I would barely lose any money on it anyway. I barely, it'd be like 50 grand or whatever. It doesn't even matter, and it doesn't even matter. Okay, and this is also what I mean by I don't think about spending money, because if I had to think about spending money, it would just turn into this eternal death loop of me just, just there was legitimately zero way that I could spend the money other than like doing drugs, gambling, alcohol. But that's a very, that's another just honest way of looking at it. If I spent 2,000 out of my 12,000, and my 12,000 will probably turn into like 20 or 23,000, 24,000 here within about 4 or 5 months, it probably will. All right, I've been putting the money back into the front end of the herd, and I've been growing the front end of the herd, right? And I have the smaller animals at the preconditioning facility. All right, I will be doubling my pay, here within about 4 or 5 months, and there's a real possibility that my income actually goes upwards every single month, simply because here in about 4 or 5 months I will be looking to redo my loans. And even if I took a loan for $240,000 and I spent $20,000 a month, by the time I spent that $20,000 a month, I would have made multiple sums of it back. Even if I ran my business sideways, I would have made more money than that. All right, even if I, even if I just ran my business sideways, I would have made more money than that. All right, even right now, I would anticipate that I'm making somewhere between $30,000 and $35,000 a month. All right, even if I ran my business sideways, I would make that money back and then some. So what does it matter, right? But there's no way. How do I spend $20,000 a month? There's no way to do that. Now, I don't even know. Well, there is one reasonable way for me to do it, and that is to put the money into my business. And the whole thing about and I am going to be using money, right? I am going to be using money. My whole thing about the only way for me to determine, what should I buy and what should I not buy, simply because the amount of money that I have is so large. I can buy anything and it wouldn't matter. I could dig a hole in the ground right now and put $2 million in it and light that money on fire and it wouldn't matter to me. I make such a tremendous sum of money that effectively I can buy anything. So how do I determine what to buy and what not to buy? And that is through moral guidelines. That's what I've determined. There is nothing else that I can do other than follow some kind of a moral principle. And early next year, I will be buying myself a new truck. I determined that when I start selling 10 animals a month, and I make enough money to buy 20 or 25 or whatever it may be from just reinvesting the earnings, and I'm looking to leverage against my earnings and my balance sheet as well, when that starts to happen, I will buy myself a new truck and I will buy myself a big trailer, okay? But right now I'm still only liquidating 5 animals a month. I'm not leveraging against my earnings. When I sell my 5, maybe I end up buying 10. Right? And, maybe I end up buying 12, whatever it may be, 10 or 12, about 10. And, and for me to bring home 10 calves, I don't need a giant truck and I don't need a giant trailer. For me to take 5 animals to the sale barn, I don't need a giant truck and I don't need a giant trailer, okay? So, but that's the thing, is I will still buy myself cool things. I will still buy myself a big truck and I will still buy myself a big trailer, but I am following a set of moral guidelines for how I spend money. And when it comes down to it, I have nothing to prove to anybody, okay? I don't have anything to prove to anybody. I legitimately don't care if all of you drop dead. It doesn't mean anything to me. All right, if I want to spend $3,500 a month, if that's what I've decided that I'm going to do, and I make $45,000 and I only want to spend 7% of it, then that's what I'll do. I don't have anything to prove to anybody. I'm the one with the money. What does it matter? I don't care if you died. Keep your BS to yourself. I'm the one with the money. All right, what does it matter to me? You can have your opinion. Just understand, I actually have the money. I actually make the money. I don't care. I can do whatever I want. Nobody's paying me to do anything. I'm not about to go on a journey with anybody. You could all die tomorrow. It doesn't matter to me. All right. I also hope and pray that all of you, find something good to do in the world and do well at it. Okay. And when it comes to my personal finances, I would reasonably anticipate that over the next month, my debt to equity ratio, granted that I continue to run my business and I continue to follow the business plan, I reinvest my earnings and put that money back into my cattle herd, and I grow I raise the cattle for the next month, and I do that properly, right? And I don't whatever, right? I don't get hit by a tornado or anything like that, granted that I do that, my debt to equity ratio will actually fall under 80%, within about a month. My debt to equity ratio will fall under 80%, and I would still reasonably anticipate that by about March of next year, my debt to equity ratio will still be under 30%. I think I underestimated. But that's the thing. It's like when I make my plans, right? And I'm not exactly sure, but but when I make my plans, I always lowball myself. Okay, I always lowball myself, and And there is a very real possibility that even with the cattle market tanking, I will still, my earnings will still outperform the drop in the market. With the weather cooling down, the animals will actually gain more weight. The animals will actually eat more food when it's getting cool. When it's cooler outside, the animals will eat more food, and there will just be more food available because the grass will grow better. But the whole thing, this was actually supposed to be the part of the first thing that I was discussing in this video. But I'm telling you, there were a lot of people, and I'm just telling you, there were a lot of people. There was 1 week where I went to the sale barn. There was 1 month where I went to the sale barn for 3 weeks out of the month, simply because the people were bidding up everything so badly that I couldn't buy anything at a reasonable price. So I only ended up buying one animal one time. And I even ended up buying a couple of 200-pound bull calves, unweaned. They were unweaned. I remember because the two Red Bull calves, they were balling and they were pacing the fence. I remember, and they were unweaned. They were 200 pounds, and I paid $7 a pound for them, and that was a good deal at that time. But I'm telling you, there were a lot of people at the sale barn that were buying when I say 500-pound cattle, I'm effectively talking about 500 to 550 pounds. Okay, so they weren't exactly 500 pounds. They, somewhere between 5 and 550. They were buying these. People were buying these calves for 5 1/4. I'm telling you, it was happening. People were buying all of these calves, like legitimately all of them, bidding up everything. 5 1/4 on these 500-pound calves, unweaned bull calves. I'm telling you, a lot of people have lost tremendous sums of money. You don't lose money until you sell them, but a lot of people are sitting on negative equity. That's what I'll say. A lot of people right now are sitting on negative equity. I'm telling you, there were a lot of people that were buying straight up 500-pound cattle for 5 1/4 unweaned bull calves, buying them hand over fist for a month straight. Thousands of them. All right, and that was just the one sale barn that I went to. I'm telling you, a lot of people lost a lot of money. And when I drive around and I take a look at these farms, and I'm not like, just whatever, being nosy about it. I'm just saying, I'm just driving by and I just happen to see it. And the way that my brain is wired, I can take a look at a farm and tell you the balance sheet within 30 seconds. All right, granted that I didn't, have a conversation with the owner of the farm and discuss his investment or their investment strategy. I don't know exactly what's going on with their financials, but I could tell you if their farm is going financially underwater or not very quickly. All right, and I'm telling you, there were a lot of people. Thousands of these cattle got sold at those prices. 5 1/4 for a 500-pound unweaned bull calf. Thousands of them. And that was the one sale barn that I went to, and people were buying these calves hand over fist. All right, and a lot of these people got burned real bad. But, here within about a month, I would still reasonably anticipate that, I would have about 5 or 6 cattle ready for market. I'm going to take my 5 or 6 cattle to the market, and I'm going to, take the money and reinvest the earnings back into my business. And granted that I continue to run my business and I do somewhat decently over over the next 30 days. And, granted that I do that, my balance sheet will be under a 30% debt to equity ratio by about next month. And by about March, I would still reasonably anticipate that my debt to equity ratio falls under 30%. All right, because and one of the things that I kind of failed to think about was just simply the amount of appreciation that will happen if I increase the size of my herd. Okay, me reinvesting my earnings will drastically increase the size of my herd. I'll have gone from a 35 to about maybe a 70. I'll have more than doubled the size of my herd. And by about March. And so that would be from me just reinvesting my earnings. And I failed to consider the fact that if I'm appreciating 70 animals at a time, that's going to produce me a lot more unrealized gains. And I'll probably be liquidating 10 animals at a time instead of 5. All right, and so I failed to really understand exactly how much money I was making. But the whole thing about the amount of money that I make is that you have to understand the amount of money that I make is so large that I don't even concern myself with it. If I legitimately need money, If I genuinely need more money, I will just sell 1 or 2 of my cattle. If I genuinely need money, I'll just sell a few of my cattle. If I'm like looking to grow my business and I want to buy 10 animals, I'll sell 5 of my big ones. If I want to buy 10 animals and a load of grain, I'll just sell 5 of my 5 of my animals at 850 pounds. All right. I don't concern myself with money. If I legitimately need money, I'll just sell I'll just sell a little bit of my investments and I'll reinvest the money. That's the thing about me, is I don't have a spending problem. I don't have a spending problem, and the amount of money that I make is effectively so large. And when it comes down to it, I'm not rubbing it in anybody's face. I'm just telling you it is what it is. Nobody cares about an opinion. It's the truth, and it doesn't matter what you think. All right? It's the truth. It doesn't matter what you think. If I took a loan for $240,000 and I held my land for collateral, all right, and they just gave me the loan. Well, first of all, I actually spoke to a banker about taking a loan against my land, and they told me that for the first 20 years it's interest only, and then for the next 10 years, it's interest plus principal. So granted that I paid off the loan in the first 20 years of the loan, and 240 grand, I make more money than that on an annual basis, more than 50% more money than that already. I already make more money than that. What does it matter to me? By the time I spent all that money, I would have made all the money back and then some. And for me to spend that amount of money, I would have to spend $20,000 a month. All right? It's a ridiculous amount of money. I make such a large amount of money, but I am looking to utilize this capital. That's the thing about me, is that I am looking to utilize this capital. And the way that I found that I will utilize this capital is to grow my business. By about March of next year, I will be growing my business. All right. By about March of next year, I will be utilizing this capital to grow my business. That's the big idea. I'm effectively just getting everything ready to leverage myself early next year and redo my loans and grow my business with the money. Okay. But I'm already in a situation where I'm not concerned about money at all. 0%. The price of feeder cattle could go to $1.50. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care. All right. I make such a large amount of money. It doesn't even matter. I don't even concern myself with the amount of money that I make. If I need money, I just pay myself. I just sell a couple of my cattle. Granted that I don't do anything moronic, I can't even spend the amount of money that I make. It's not even possible. All right. The amount of money, I can't spend it. It's not possible.